If your buttercream stripes keep bleeding into a muddy mess, stop stressing. By the end of this video, you're going to master the exact step-by-step hacks to get your stripes looking flawlessly sharp, just like this. My first helpful tip for you is being sure you put a lot of buttercream on the board to attach your cake. Later on, when you're scraping, it'll help you keep the cake in place without moving it across the board when you're pushing the scraper on the cake. So put it on there, make it centered, and it should be firmly attached now. Also, at this stage, when you're stacking your cake and pressing it down, be sure that you see how this is leaning a little bit. You want your cake to be perfectly parallel. You want the layers to be lined up. This will help a lot when you're going around with the comb later. Now I'm just going to fill this gap with some more buttercream. Tip number 2, you're going to need more of your primary color, in this case mine is orange, than your secondary color. And it helps if you base ice your cake the same color as your primary color. That way later when you're scraping, if you scrape down pretty far, the only color that's going to show through is the orange color. I pulled these cakes out of the fridge just a second ago, so I'm not worried about this center frosting shifting around. It's pretty sturdy already. But if your frosting in the middle is shifting a little bit, go ahead and at this stage, put your cakes in the fridge so that you're not having your layers sliding around. For this cake, I'm going to do the old plot method. So I'm just going to take my primary color and start spreading it directly onto the cake, the top and the sides. When using these types of frosting combs, you're going to apply the frosting liberally and take away as needed. You want your buttercream to be slightly warm. You don't want it to be very cold and seize up on you. You want it to be smooth and flowy, nice and silky, and as few air bubbles as possible. That means mixing it vigorously while it's warm, or leaving it in the bowl long enough that the paddle knocks out all of the air bubbles. If you want to see more about the basics of getting a nice smooth cake with sharp corners on top, check out my other tutorial. So at this stage, just look at your cake and be sure that you have an ample amount of frosting on all sides and there's no major gaps or dips in the level of the frosting. Now comes the fun part. We're going to use our frosting comb. The combs that you'll use will have notches in this, and this is what creates the stripes on your cake. So the protruding notch is going to be your secondary color, and where there's a gap, that's going to be your primary color. And they come in all sizes. As you can see, this one has like thick stripes on this side and thinner stripes on this side. And I even have some really tiny stripes, and they all do basically the same thing. It scrapes notches around the outside of your cake, and then you fill them with a second color. And that's the basis of making buttercream stripes. So here we go. We are going to get started. So my next tip would be whatever type of frosting comb you're using, be sure that the amount of frosting, the thickness of the frosting on your cake is at minimum as deep as these ridges in your comb. Next, much like our buttercream smoothing tutorial, you want to hold the base of your scraper flat on the cake board. And then when you're pressing it into the cake, you want to hold it at a 90-degree angle. Because your scraper has to rest flat on this board as you're going around, you want to be sure that your cake board or plate or whatever you're using doesn't have any defects or any bumps or places where the cake board itself is bent. Because if you think about it, your scraper is running over the board like it's a road, and if there's a big part where the cardboard is sticking up or something, it's going to cause like a pothole effect or a speed bump effect, and it's going to interrupt the smoothness of how you're holding your scraper against your frosting. Holding the scraper straight up and down at a 90-degree angle, we're going to start pressing it into the soft frosting and rotating our cake. The stripes are going to look pretty rough at first, but don't worry. They're going to get more and more defined as we scrape away the frosting. So at this point, I have a lot of frosting on this side of my scraper. I'm going to go ahead and scrape that off into the bowl and then keep going around the cake. Okay. Again, making sure it's flat on the cake board so that we're starting in the same place as we were the last time we were going around. We're going to keep going around the cake. And you'll notice anywhere that you see these gaps like this, That means the stripe isn't totally filled, so we need to keep going. There's bubbles here and here, so that means that we haven't pressed far enough to get a fully smooth stripe. Like, for example, the section right here, this one looks good because there's no gaps, no bubbles, so it's looking good. So until all of our stripes look nice and smooth like this part of this one, we're gonna keep scraping down the frosting. All right, so if we take a look at our stripes, they mostly look pretty good, but there are a couple of big gaps, like this one right here and even this one right here. So taking either a piping bag with your primary color, orange in this case, or the tip of your spatula, go ahead and add a little extra frosting there. And don't worry too much, we will have one other chance to fix these later if necessary, but it's best to get them as smooth and filled as possible at this stage, because it just makes your life a little bit easier when there's just one color of buttercream to worry about at a time. So, and also we're going to look at the top edge of the cake, because the top edge of the cake is also our primary color, so this is going to be like our final stripe on top. If you look around the edge of the cake, you'll notice there's ample frosting in the areas where it is lifted, but right here there's a gap where the frosting dips down. Go ahead and add more frosting there as well, because likely when we move on to the next step, there will be a gap there if we don't add frosting now. So go ahead, add some right here, and let it fold over to the side. There we go. Because we want the top edge of our cake to be consistent all the way around and the same height. We don't want any dips along the way. We are so close. Just a couple more passes ought to do it. Looking around the edges, this looks pretty good. I only see a couple more bubbles. Speaking of bubbles, let me show you how to fix those, especially the small ones. So I just saw one right here. Sometimes you'll notice a little dip in the frosting and then there's a hole in it. This usually means that there is an air pocket underneath the frosting. So let's see. Yeah, so obviously I gouged out the frosting, but you could see there was an additional little dip of frosting that was missing there. And it might have caused a bubble later on if we just kept smoothing it. So we kind of open it up and then add extra frosting and kind of press it in there to fill it fully. All right, and I'm just addressing the last couple little gaps here and there around the edge of the frosting. Now take a look at this cake. It's not 100% perfect. There is like one tiny hole here, and you'll notice in some areas the frosting is not 100% smooth. That is okay, because after we add our second color, we're gonna scrape over the top with a flat scraper one more time. So if there's any small imperfections, don't stress yourself out too much about them. You'll have a chance to fix them after we chill the cake. Speaking of chilling the cake, this is my next tip. Wait until your cake is totally chilled before you even think about adding your second color for stripes. Even for a small cake like this, I'm gonna chill it a minimum of 30 minutes because you want this layer of buttercream frosting, your first color of stripes, to be super solid before you come back and add your second color. This way, if the frosting is chilled, it's going to preserve the definition between your two colors, because you'll have one firm color that's chilled firm and a second color that's soft. And that's kind of the whole magic of this technique, is that this one stays firm and keeps those nice, sharp, defined lines. Okay, let's chill this cake. My next tip has to do with our secondary color. Mine is blue. So when you bag up your secondary color, you'll definitely want to use a coupler so that you can change between different size and shape tips. I'm probably going to use at least 3 different tips today, so it helps to have a coupler in the bag so you don't have to empty the bag to change the tip or have multiple bags. So For example, we're going to start with a nice thick round tip. This one is a Wilton number 10. This is going to help us fill the stripes. I'm then going to swap to a smaller round tip, maybe a 3 or 5, if I have to fill in any little gaps or bubbles where the frosting isn't full enough. And lastly, the third tip I'll probably use is a star tip for a border, or whatever type of decorative tip I'll use for the border, because likely, since our main color was orange, I'll do a border as the accent color, as the secondary color for some contrast. So bag your frosting with a coupler. Next little bit of advice, you're going to want to use either a grippy pad or double-sided tape or single-sided tape that's rolled into little double-sided rolls for this part. Why? Because anytime you're scraping a chilled cake, you have to apply more force to it than you would a cake where the frosting is soft to get a nice kind of clean edge on your cake. So if you're pressing harder, your cake might want to shift or migrate across your cake turntable. So any of these methods will help your cake board stay firmly in one position on your cake turntable. So our cake has been super chilled and all the orange frosting is nice and firm. And that's going to be key to keeping the definition of these lines, because as we scrape away the blue frosting, the orange frosting is going to stay right where it is. It's not going to blur or blend with anything. So start with a large round tip, and we are going to pipe to fill in all these gaps. Initially, I guess I should clean up the board from any excess frosting. We are going to try to work quickly so that our chilled frosting doesn't have time to soften. Start as close to the surface of the cake as possible and squeeze consistently, and you want to overfill these gaps. You want the frosting to be level with the orange frosting. You want these to be completely filled in. That way when you go back in with your flat scraper, there won't be any gaps, and then you'll end up with one smooth thickness of frosting on the cake. All right, that one looks good. And then just continue up the cake. Technically, I guess you could try to do this with a palette knife, but this is going to be much easier, faster, and more effective. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take our flat scraper. You can use a plastic one or a metal one at this stage, and scrape the excess blue frosting down, and we're going to keep scraping until all the smudges of blue frosting disappear. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to choose to use a plastic scraper for this tip, but if you find this step difficult, after making the first couple passes over your cake, you can use a heated metal scraper, just the flat side, and that can help clean up any additional smudges of blue frosting pretty easily. So here we go. We're going to make our first couple passes. So it looks a little messy, but don't worry, we're about to fix that. Maybe the most important tip for this cake. Between each scrape, you need to clean off all this frosting entirely and start with a fresh side to your scraper. Otherwise, you'll get more blurring and blending. So let's quickly do that, and we'll go around one more time. And I know I keep saying you have to move quickly. You have time to work on this. It's just you want to keep the orange frosting as cold as possible while you're doing this step for best results. Okay, so here we go. See what it looks like right now. I'm gonna go in with my freshly cleaned off scraper and go one more time around and see what it looks like. So here we go. So there's just a couple smudges. We're gonna keep going until all of the stripes look like this. And like before, when you're scraping around, you want to hold this firmly in one position. You don't want to move it up and down. It should stay in the same position the whole time so that you don't have any smearing or blending. I am going to swap to the metal scraper for this last pass around, and we should be good. And I'll keep this plastic scraper nearby because I'm going to use it to scrape off the top edge and get a flat surface on my cake after I get the sides just how I want them. See how the cake board moved? That's what happens when you don't put tape under your board. So don't do what I did. Refer back to our previous tip and put something under your board so that you won't be interrupted while you're trying to get one clean swipe around the cake. All right, here we go. The ideal situation is to have your scraper start and stop at the same point. So I'm gonna start here and rotate the cake all the way around in one fluid movement until I reach back at the same point. So at this stage, it looks pretty great from a distance, and honestly, you could, stop scraping the sides right now, take the top edge off, and it'd be fine. But just to get the lines even more definition, I'm gonna chill this cake one more time and go one more time with the scraper after it's chilled and see if that makes that final bit of difference I'm looking for. Okay, I've chilled the cake and I'm going to go around it one last time just to see if I can clean up the little sort of frayed edges in between the colors in some areas. Mostly from a distance it looks really great, but this area in particular, the orange kind of squished over into the blue, and I'm going to see if I just take off one more tiny layer, if that'll fix that. Yeah, it's a little bit better. All right, we're gonna try once more with the metal scraper. Because I believe it was the difference in temperature that allowed the orange to squeeze over slightly into the blue section. And maybe not maybe now that the blue is the same temperature, it'll be okay. So it looks like there was a cake crumb in the blue frosting right here. So I'm just going to take that out. And either with a piping bag or a little buttercream tip, press the blue back into the hole that I just made. And you can use this technique for fixing bubbles also, if you see any bubbles when you're going around your cake. Okay, last time. If you see any areas where the frosting started to lift off in one direction, you can go back over it going the opposite direction to lay it back down flat. So I'm going to try that. So instead of turning it this way, I'm going to turn it this way towards myself. All right, now all that remains with a fresh scraper is to go around the top edge and scrape it down smooth to a nice right angle. So I like to use this one. You can use the metal one if you like. If you use the plastic one, use it kind of more like a wedge at an angle. And if you use the metal one, you hold it more up and down at a perpendicular to the cake. And my final tip for you would be to use your remainder of blue buttercream, and you could use that for the accent color for any borders on the top or bottom. Since the whole top of the cake is orange, it would look nice if the border was blue. All right, that looks pretty smooth. And there's our buttercream cake. You'll notice that the definition between the stripes is a lot more crisp than when you use the piping bag. So if you want them to look nice and bold and good contrast, definitely try using the buttercream comb method.